So folks, we're back with another Festival of Legends card review, and today we're finishing off all the remaining neutral cards, and starting off here with Photographer Fizzle. I love this kind of card so much. He is a 3-mana 3/3 battle cry. Take a snapshot of your current hand and shuffle it into your deck. And interestingly, that's not like going to shuffle each of the individual cards. It's going to shuffle the snapshot, as you see here, which is a 2-mana spell that will then add the snapshotted cards to your hand. So this is an absolutely crazy amount of potential value. Because you're basically just getting an extra copy of a bunch of cards. You know, you could snapshot, I mean, I guess up to 9 cards, right? You got to have Fizzle played out, but a giant 9-card hand. You could play all those out. You know, you're going to need some hand space when you play the snapshot, but you could play them out and then get them back again, which, you know, sometimes that's just going to be a crazy amount of extra cards and value, but other times you might be able to duplicate really key cards. And, you know, if you've got like a 2-card combo that you want to duplicate, you could keep that 2-card combo in hand. You could play your Fizzle, draw back into your snapshot again, and get like those same 2 cards still in hand, and then like maybe play all 4 of them out at once or something for some kind of absolutely crazy, cheesy sort of thing that would otherwise be impossible. So the Fizzle here, I think both, you know, for like a grindy value deck, a control deck, this just gets you more removal, more threats, more awesome stuff. But for a, you know, combo deck, something that's really specific, some kind of crazy game plan, Fizzle might create some opportunities there as well, basically duplicating cards that are otherwise limited to maybe 1-ofs or 2-ofs. Now, look, I mean, it's not always that easy, right? There's clearly some work that has to go into this. You got to play the Fizzle. You got to draw into the snapshot. You got some mana to pay to get to that state. So, you know, that's going to slow things down a little bit. That's going to be hard for some decks to manage. But for a big combo deck, or especially one of those grindy attrition control style decks, that's not really going to be all that costly. Just 3 mana up front. They sometimes don't have anything to do on turn 3 anyway. You know, maybe you save it a little bit to get the right side sort of hand. Weave this in on turn 6, turn 7, or whatever. 2 mana later for the snapshot's probably going to feel totally free later in a game. And I will say, in these like fresh rotation metas, those kind of greedy attrition decks tend to do a little bit better because there aren't as many refined combos and refined crazy synergies. If you think back to like when Forged in the Barrens was fresh, you know, Control Priest was really, really good in that fresh meta. A card like this could have fit perfectly into that grindy, greedy kind of style. So I personally love what Fizzle's about. I actually think it has a lot of potential as a powerful card as well, just because it can make so many cool things. And you probably don't even need it to be crazy. Just getting 3 or 4 good cards out of this might be more than enough on average. So I'm all about Fizzle. I think this card looks really fun and actually has a fair bit of potential as well. So next up here we have Freebird. Excellent musical references again. 4 mana 2/2 beast here in the neutral set. Charge. It's always crazy. And Battle Cry gain +1/+1 for each other Freebird you've played this game. So man, I can see the makings of a Freebird deck here already, where you're trying to create and play as many Freebirds as possible, and then, you know, eventually maybe getting yourself a big 5/5, 6/6, 7/7 sort of Freebird at the end of that chain. And I mean, that's pretty cool in theory. That said, you know, thankfully perhaps these Freebirds are pretty expensive, and they're gonna start to take a while before they really feel like good plays. And also, like, you know, eventually, you know, if you get a 7/7 or an 8/8 Freebird or something, you're probably going to start thinking about, you know, that's my big lethal card. I'm going to hit them really, really hard with this gigantic, this Freebird. But getting to that stage, you're going to be sacrificing so much mana, and the Freebirds, I think, are going to feel really awkward to play. Like, if you're just running them into the opponent's face, they're going to be doing a lot of other things and hitting you hard and developing wide boards, and you're going to be making some really inefficient plays along the way. So yes, there are ways to copy this. You know, we've got like the new cold storage card in Shaman, right? And actually Shaman has Battle Cry synergies as well. So that's kind of neat. You know, if Selective Breeder sticks around in the core set for Hunter or something, right? Much like you copy Shock Spitters or whatever else. Yeah, there's ways to get extra Freebirds. I think Dire Frenzy has been in the core set too. That could leave, but if it's not, you know, okay, even more buffs and more Freebird sort of synergies as well. But it's still just going to take a lot of time and a lot of mana. And unlike, say, Shock Spitters, for instance, where, you know, you were doing other things to set up your shock spitters. You're playing cheap weapons, you're swinging in, you're just playing, you know, reactively, and then you have the big shock spitter at the end to seal the deal, right? That was super efficient because you didn't have to sacrifice along the way. For the Freebirds, you gotta play the Freebirds. You're gonna have to be playing Freebirds, so it's gonna take a lot longer to spin up. It's gonna, you know, require way more mana commitment to get these into an interesting space, and even then, charge cards have limitations as well, unlike shock spitters, which go over the top and get brand. So all in all, you know, this feels to me more like a kind of meme status card, which is maybe a good thing because you wouldn't want this to feel too good with charge and such. But, you know, probably a meme status. I can't wait to make some Freebird decks and try to get like the biggest Freebirds that we can and do some shenanigans and stuff. But I don't actually expect this to be a particularly competitive card, just because that 4 mana every single time is really going to stack up and feel like way too much to keep up with other decks. Moving on here to the Crowd Surfer, a new 1/1 neutral Murloc for 1 mana. Death Rattle, give any other minion +1/+1 and this Death Rattle. So that can hit enemy minions notably. He's surfing across the crowd, which is both your opponent and yours, apparently. So some real risk on this one. You might accidentally buff your opponent's board if you're playing in a minion versus minion sort of scenario, and I honestly think that's going to happen a lot, and that's going to feel so bad when it happens. Like, just losing that +1/+1 is really going to put you behind on board. Now, you know, you can argue, hey, it's going to bounce back to me at some point if I just keep playing minions. It might, of course, but sometimes those minion based strategies really tend to snowball, and once you've lost the initiative there, and once you've lost that snowballing, you never get it back. It's really hard to recover sometimes. So I fear the risk on Crowd Surfer is going to be a little bit too high. And then the scenarios where you're the ones playing minions and your opponents aren't, is it going to stack up fast enough or stick around long enough? Because your opponent can kind of kill things in order so that this is the last card that dies, or maybe even create a scenario where they know it's the last card that dies and they're the only one with a minion out, so they're going to take the buff off of you in a calculated way as opposed to just a random way. So yeah, I don't know that this is something that a Murloc deck's really going to need, because the risks on this one might just be too high. Moving over to the Cover Artist. This is a new 4 mana 3/3 with Battlecry, transform into a 3/3 copy of a minion, and we've got ourselves a little cheap faceless manipulator here. There was one of the princes, the 3-cost prince, I think literally had this exact same effect, but some deck conditions, of course. This time coming in at 4 mana here, somewhere in the middle. And we have seen these copy effects be relevant in Hearthstone in the past. You know, get a big spell damage minion down and copy it, and then you've got 2 big spell damage minions, or whatever other effect you might want to copy. Of course, if you got something really big, the Cover Artist can get a nice big effect for only 4 mana. So these have that very occasional situational value where some deck really, really wants to copy something for some reason. Outside of that, it's often pretty awkward to use this. You know, setup is a little bit too high. 4 mana for a 3/3 body is not exciting. So you really need a super specific reason for a card like this to feel worth it. And typically that's pretty niche and pretty limited in its application. So a card that absolutely could find its way into a deck because of that specific utility that it has, but for the same reason, because it's so specific, often excludes itself from wide levels of play as well. So I think Cover Artists will be completely fine, show up every once in a while as something cool and fun, but nothing super consistent or crazy. Moving on here to the unpopular has-been. This is a 6 mana 5/5 undead with Death Rattle, summon a random 5-cost minion from the past. And I love these from the past cards. I think this is really fun. It's something we really don't see enough. But it's always fun to kind of see all these wild format cards, particularly for people who stick to standard and don't get to take a look at these too often. Now, that said, of course, the pool of 5-cost cards from the past is enormous and on average really low quality, because of course old cards were worse than new cards on average, and a lot of them just don't keep up from stats or effects. So on average, you're going to get some real garbage here out of the unpopular has-been. And really, there aren't even that many high rolls, I suspect. If you look through the collection, you know, there might be 1 or 2 you're really excited to get. but the next 10, you know, are going to be some real disappointments. So that said, you know, I don't think most decks are going to have any reason to run this. Even if you're looking for death rattle synergies or something specific, there are way better death rattles that are more consistent, predictable than this one. So really fun card, probably totally fine in something like Arena, but just not a card that I think makes any sense in standard format. Next up here is the Mishmash Mosher, an 8-mana 3/10 undead with Rush. And after this attacks, gain +1 attack and attack a random enemy minion. Say attack one more time. So the idea here is you got this big 3/10, you trade it into something small, it's going to gain +1 attack, and then it's going to proc its attack effect again and attack a random enemy minion. Now, I think, based on that, since that uses the word attack again, I think it's basically going to keep chaining as long as it's alive and there are minions to attack. So, for instance, if the opponent had a, you know, 3 3/3s on board, I suspect it would kill all 3 3/3s, just creating a chain. Now, it gets a little bit iffier, you know, if they got a 3/3, a 4/4, and a 5/5, because your math may not work out. After your one targeted attack, it goes up to 4, but then it might accidentally hit the 5/5 instead of the you know, the 4/4 for the clean hit, because it becomes a random enemy minion on successive attacks, and that of course means it could get a little bit messy and hairy in regards to how effective this is going to be. So you need the right sort of shapes of boards, and ultimately, all that said, this just still feels really clunky to me. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be pretty conditional to board states, fitting into it nicely. I think most decks will have access to way better kinds of removal cards if that's what they're looking for in the 8-mana slots. And the fact that this is like a minion/removal hybrid probably doesn't offer a lot of value. The undead synergy seems like there's way better big undeads for decks that care about that. So ultimately, the Mishmash Mosher here doesn't look particularly exciting to me. Now, this, on the other hand, seems very interesting. This is the Concert Promo Drake, an 8-mana 8/8 dragon, and it's tradable. Yeah, tradable is in Festival of Legends, which means tradable must be a new permanent keyword, something we've all been asking for. A keyword that actually made its way out of its rotation year. So like Rush, for instance, you know, kicked off in Witchwood and then became a staple keyword. Seems like tradable might be doing exactly the same, which is pretty awesome. So I wonder if there will be other tradable cards in this set, but also perhaps in the core set as well. Maybe some tradable cards will show up in the core set from Stormwind, where tradable's from. But also this card has a finale, destroy an enemy minion. So a big old 8/8 dragon here that if you play and finish on 0 mana, you get to take a nice little swing on board. That's fine. This seems like an insane arena card. Standard format, usually you're going to have better things to do with 8 mana. Better kinds of removal. I mean, maybe if you have some really specific needs in regards to big dragons for a dragon deck, this could be there, but I think there's usually even better dragons available at competitive mana spots. So the tradable's cool for high cost cards, yes, so that you can trade them off if you don't have them now, and in particular, if you can't like line up a finale like you want right now, just get rid of it, get it later. But I don't think that's enough to save this card in regards to standard still. Even when it pays off exactly, I don't think it's that great of a result. So ultimately not a super powerful card, but a super meaningful one in regards to showcasing this tradable keyword. So next up here we have Rolling Stone. Oh boy, more music puns. I love it. It's a 2-mana 2/2 elemental with Rush and Battle Cry. The last card you played costs 1, gain +1/+1. So actually pretty cool if you can actually line this up on curve, get a 1-drop, and then you get a 3/3 with Rush on turn 2. That's not bad. That's actually really big and swingy to help you take advantage of a board. I guess the question for this one is the downside here, the consistency when this doesn't connect. Is that going to limit this card? If you miss your 1-drop, are you happy to play a 2/2 with Rush on turn 2? I don't think that's a disastrous result necessarily, but definitely feels a lot worse than a 3/3 because you can't kill 1/3s in particular, which is a really common shape for your turn 1 plays from your opponent, so you might be expecting and hoping to kill that early minion. So I don't know, man. If there's like a really zooey deck that has just a hyper consistent early curve with lots of 1s, and particularly if they have some maybe like elemental synergies to explore alongside that, I think there's a possibility for this card, but it feels pretty fringe and pretty unlikely. I think you know, even if you are playing a minion based tempo-y type deck where this might fit naturally, you probably want something that's more reliable and independently good on average. I don't know that the best case scenario here makes up for the average case scenario, which I fear happens more often than people might think. Moving on here to the Candle Raiser. I love this, dude. She's holding up a kobold with a candle at the concert. This is a 4-mana 3/3 with Divine Shield and Finale. Give adjacent minions Divine Shield. So this is kind of interesting again from a you know, minion based early swarmy style deck, right? You have a couple minions down that's stuck, and then if you can land the Candle Raiser on turn 4, of course, it's really going to shore up a board nicely. The 4-mana 3/3 Divine Shield is not super exciting in its own right, but 2 additional Divine Shields take some good trades on board. Just stabilize your minions to go face, and then follow up with a Bloodlust next turn or whatever it is, right? That's shockingly intriguing for a card like this. I don't, there's something about this artwork. I don't know if this is a card we expect to see at Hearthstone every day or want to see often on board. Maybe some of you would love to see this on board in Hearthstone every day. I'm not sure, but this is like got some sleeper interesting applications to me. Like, I don't think this is terrible. I actually don't hate this. I think there are some decks, Zooey style, minion style decks, where this landing on 4 could be a really, really big a big hit and a big win. So keep an eye on the Candle Raiser. I know many of you will be very excited to do exactly that. So moving on here, we have the Instrument Tech, a new 2-mana 1/2 with Battlecry. Draw a weapon. And yeah, these little tutor cards like this are great. Some deck out there is definitely going to care enough about finding their weapon consistently enough that the Instrument Tech is a valuable card for them. It's like, yeah, not a great body on board, of course, but you're just drawing into something you like and care about. So I think somebody will make this card work. It's efficient, it's clean, it's easy, simple, but still seems good enough. Moving on here to the Party Animal. This is a 2-mana 2/3 beast with Battlecry. Give +1/+1 to a minion of each type in your hand. So more Menagerie support here, and some Menagerie hand buff in particular. Not sacrificing too many stats on board here. The vanilla stat line, and then this big potential upside in hand. You know, this could easily hit 2 to 3 cards in the early game and give you a really nice mid-game swing, I suspect, on all of those bonus stats. If you're getting, you know, in total efficiency here, like a 2-mana 5/6 in stats, I think you might be rather happy about that. It depends, of course, on the ability for a Menagerie deck to find the right assortment of units and have the right sort of payoffs. I'm not totally convinced one Amalgam Band is the big enough payoff for these kinds of decks. But as you start to see all of these pieces come together with different amalgams and different Menagerie things, Party Animal does seem like a relevant enabler for that kind of deck if it shows up. So I think there's some real potential in this one. Next up, we have Paparazzi, 3-mana 3/4 Battlecry. Discover a legendary minion. And you know what? I actually think this card might be decent. Since this is Discover, and since currently we're going to have a really small selection of cards in standard format, because we're looking at a 4-set meta instead of a 6-set meta, this is going to have some relative consistency in the sorts of cards you're able to grab out of it. And I bet there is going to be some class, some deck out there who's cares a little bit about value and is a little bit, you know, grindy and control-y, like we talked about before, where the Paparazzi is going to hit consistently enough to be worth it. Whether that's you know, a couple, you know, you got 3 or 4 good class legendaries you're happy to take, a few good core set legendaries, neutral legendaries you're happy to take. And between that, you know, you're probably going to get 1 card at least that you're rather excited about. So just cycle this down early and get a legendary that's good. I mean, we've seen this before in some of these like limited discover pools. I think back to like Sunken City, where you're discovering like colossals all the time off of your various discovers there. You could imagine similar scenarios here with the Paparazzi, and frankly, you could discover colossals still off your Paparazzi. So, you know, this could fall off really hard, really fast in the future as more and more cards get introduced, and you know, the breadth of legendaries widens, and perhaps the quality lowers, especially as more neutrals get added in. But for now, I bet a deck runs Paparazzi. Moving on here to the Audio Medic. This is a 2-mana 2/3 with Rush and Finale gain Lifesteal. So man, I always wish cards like this were good in Hearthstone. I'd love to be able to just play my little 2/3 with Rush and Lifesteal and hope that it made the difference and hope that it stabilized me against aggro decks, but in reality, I just don't think cards like this get there. It's probably going to end up trading into a Divine Shield, best case scenario, and doing nothing. Just popping a Divine Shield, even if it eats a 2/2 here and there. Did you really do enough with your turn? Is this really playing enough towards a game plan? I kind of doubt it. You know, activating the Finale too sometimes won't work. It's like, I really need to play this on turn 3 and I don't have the clean mana, or I need to play this on 5 and I only have 2/2 drops and I missed the Finale, and it's like, oh god, this card was already kind of mediocre feeling and now it's whiffing as well. I just don't think you can have that for cards. So unfortunately, the Audio Medic feels relegated to the collection at best. I don't think it'll make too many decks. So this card's funny, the Annoying Fan, and we've got a few fan cards here to talk about. This is a 1-mana 1/2 mech with a battle cry. Choose a minion. It can't attack while this is alive. So that is indeed pretty funny and annoying. So, you know, your opponent plays down a thing, you drop the Annoying Fan, and you know, maybe they're a board-based deck without any removal and they just can't kill the Annoying Fan because you've locked down their trade. You play something else. They're just kind of always playing from behind a little bit, and that minion is stuck forever while the Annoying Fan just lives on board. That's the dream scenario. The reality, I think, is far less likely. This is just way too easy to kill. I don't really think this limitation is significant because it doesn't actually remove anything or kill anything. Eventually that minion's going to unlock, and I don't think you'll have like turned the corner enough that it was worth it to just kind of stall it out in the meantime, because you're just playing a 1-mana 1/2, right? You're not doing anything great in exchange. You're playing a bad play to kind of barely slow down your opponent a little bit. So I don't really see the Annoying Fan being a good card, other than occasionally off like Discover effects and stuff for a perfectly timed, you know, I'm gonna basically freeze your 8/8 for a turn or whatever, but that's kind of just like a freeze attack as well, right? Or freeze effect. So, you know, interesting card. I think it's really, really funny, but probably not something that shows up in decks. Moving on here to the Obsessive Fan. This is a 4-mana 2/6 battlecry. Choose a minion. It has stealth while this is alive. So this is really good flavor, by the way. Like, I'm hiding from my Obsessive Fan. Now, in regards to playability, this is a pretty expensive card at 4, and I mean, it's neat in theory, right? Like, you have this awesome thing next to the Obsessive Fan, and your opponent has to be able to kill both of, like, they have to be able to kill the Obsessive Fan before killing the thing that they actually care about. I do think that's neat in theory. I think in reality, setting up that sort of scenario feels a lot harder just because of the mana commitment. You know, usually if there's something you're going to want to give stealth and keep it alive for a long time, it's going to be something more expensive. You know, you're going to have to commit some mana to that to make it be worth it. And then you've got this 4 mana on top of that as well. How are you setting that up, right? And by then, does your opponent just have an AoE, a board clear that deals with both of them effectively anyway? Because stealth is not, you know, a universal protector. So ultimately, I think this will end up feeling really clunky and awkward and expensive in combination with any card that it would like to give stealth to. So kind of a neat design, pretty fun, great flavor, but ultimately, again, probably not too strong in my opinion. So next up here is the Rowdy Fan, a 3-mana 1/5 Quillbore. Battlecry, choose a minion. It has +4 attack while this is alive. So a little buff that persists here while the Rowdy Fan is up. And I mean, that's cool. The +4 attack is good. In theory, you know, playing a 3-drop that just gave +4 attack to something small and could start hitting face or whatever, that's interesting in its own right. But man, the Rowdy Fan's giving up a lot of stats for this sort of effect because it's just a 1/5. That's so easy to trade into, so easy to deal with. And frankly, of course, if you're like playing this on a 2-drop on curve, the opponent can just easily kill the 2-drop probably, right? There's no reason they can't just kill the thing that had +4 attack. And then, you know, yeah, you got a nice little short-term bonus, but ultimately you're sacrificing a little bit for the midterm. You're not developing a lot of extra stats or follow-up or keeping that pressure maintained. You're kind of going all in, and I don't know if that's going to be worth it. So Rowdy Fan, again, looks a little weak to me. Next up here, we have the Air Guitarist, a 1-mana 1/1 with Battlecry. Give your weapon +1 durability. So I guess you're saving durability because you're playing your air guitar instead of your real guitar. This is a kind of neat effect. I have to say, it's really cheap for that 1 durability with good weapons, of course. getting an extra durability for 1 mana can be worth a lot. It's not quite as good as a card like Upgrade that we've seen in Warrior, but of course can be used across a variety of classes. And something that comes to mind immediately for me is like Ruined Mithril Rod. Yes, that's rotating. That's not going to be relevant in Standard for the air guitarist now, but what about other cards like Ruined Mithril Rod? What if there are weapons like that where the durability is converting into a lot more than just an extra swing on the weapon, but is enabling that kind of effect for an entire extra round? Imagine the Ruined Mithril Rod getting another layer of discounts thanks to the air guitarist, or 2 more thanks to 2 air guitarists. That's where this starts to get intriguing to me. Like, yeah, sometimes on a regular weapon that's fine, but then there's other special cases with weapons where that might be worth even more than you'd imagine. So interesting potential on this one, to say the least. I think there are some really scary weapon designs where air guitarist makes them even scarier. Moving on to the Cowbell Soloist. It's a Tauren using a cowbell. It's a 3-mana 4/2 with Battlecry. If you control no other minions, deal 2 damage. And yeah, I just don't think this effect goes nearly far enough. That 2 damage upside really isn't that significant. The decks that would care about it probably want to have a lot of minions on board anyway. The stat line on this is a 4/2, just feels very weak and susceptible. So ultimately, yeah, this card looks really, really weak to me. Photographer Fizzle is a 4-star card. Freebird is a 2-star card. Crowd Surfer is a 2-star card. Cover Artist is a 3-star card. Unpopular Has-Been is a 1-star card. Mishmash Mosher is a 2-star card. Concert Promo Drake is a 2-star card. Rolling Stone is a 3-star card. Candle Raiser is a 3-star card, but boy, I almost gave her 4. Instrument Tech is a 4-star card. Party Animal is a 4-star card. Paparazzi is a 3-star card. Audio Medic is a 2-star card. Annoying Fan is a 2-star card. Obsessive Fan is a 2-star card. Rowdy Fan is a 1-star card. Air Guitarist is a 4-star card. Cowbell Soloist is a 1-star card. And there you go. That wraps it up for this particular review. Let me know what you guys think about these cards down in the comments below. How are you excited to use all these? Which ones do you think are sleepers? You know, these are neutral cards the last couple days. There's a lot of filler stuff, a lot of cards that are weaker. So I know some people get a little discouraged with that. Oh, these cards all suck. But just keep in mind, you know, we're looking specifically at neutrals. On average, these are going to be the weaker cards in a given set. Class cards tend to stand out a little higher and stronger and be more synergistic. So don't be discouraged if the scores here feel low or you're disappointed by these cards yourself. There's still some hope for some awesome cards coming in the near future. That said, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, game on.